This is the talk of Music City Real Estate.
Welcome back to another episode of the Talk of Music City Real Estate,
where we educate and motivate all things real estate.
My name is Monte Moore with Realty One Group Music City.
Hey, and I'm Carey Ann with CMG Financial and My Mortgage Team.
Every week, we'll be posting a new episode chock full of Nashville real estate value.
Yes, and you can follow along and subscribe at thetalkmusiccity.com.
Got a question for us? Ask away at questions@talkmusiccity.com.
Well, Monte, we are back for another show, another episode.
Carey Ann, can you imagine this to all of our real estate friends out there? Can you imagine this? I get a notice recently, or not a summons, but a notice from another attorney that I'm being sued or threatened to be sued because the house that I sold, I claimed it was a 2-car garage, and the people that bought it, my listing, claimed they couldn't get their van in the garage, so it couldn't have been a 2-car garage, and now they're suing me and the seller.
What?
How? That's what I said. What? Who's going to? And you know what? That was shocking to me, and I know it shouldn't be after this long in business, but I was so shocked. I said to my attorney at the time, I said, well, what crazy attorney in their right mind would even take on such a silly opportunity to, I mean, it's not going to go anywhere.
But don't we sprinkle a little common sense? Like I drive, a large Denali, and then we have another truck. I know those 2 cars will not fit in a 1-stall 2-car garage, right? So didn't they know that their cars aren't going to fit? Did we not measure that?
We're going to get into this topic, but here's what I found out. Here's what I found out, and every realtor out there listening has to know this. When I asked the question, who in the world would take on that kind of an opportunity or that kind of a lawsuit, the attorney said, a lot of attorneys, because you look like a pile of money. Because of your ENO insurance, you look like a pile of money.
That's crazy.
ENO insurance companies don't want to fight a lawsuit. They want to settle it. So we're going to get into that after we talk about our amazing sponsor.
Yes, thank you so much, Music City Removal. They are the #1 junk removal service in Nashville, from residential, commercial, and construction. They're experts in ridding you of junk. Their costs include labor and dumping fees without any hidden or added expenses. Whether you need a full clean out or just one item removed, they have you covered.
The Music City Removal team knows the importance of respect and trust while in someone else's home. They understand the inconvenience of junk left behind by previous homeowners and tenants, and are determined to provide an affordable and customer-focused junk removal service that puts you first. For a free on-site estimate, go to musiccityremoval.com. That's musiccityremoval.com.
Yes, Music City Removal, because clutter ain't cute.
Clutter ain't cute. So
no, nor is that lawsuit that you're about to get into.
I know, that
is crazy.
Oh, sometimes humanity, if they just would use their powers for good, it'd be such a different world. I mean, why? Who would even thinks like that? But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I do want to encourage all our real estate friends to listen into this podcast, because there's going to be some important information that you want to know. And part of that is shared experiences, so that you can be aware of that. And I've asked our amazing, incredibly wonderful,
she is wonderful,
awesome other blonde in my life, our third blonde in my life.
You've got multiple blondes in your life, don't you?
And that's Chrissy Amundson. Chrissy, are you out there?
I am. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on, Chrissy. I know that you have, even in your short time in real estate, you have an experience on this whole topic of why do you want to have ENO insurance and what kind of things can happen. Carey Ann and Chrissy, I've been in this thing for a long time, and I tell every realtor that it's really just about numbers, okay? I mean, granted, it also hinges on how good you are with the details and so forth, but it really, if you sell enough real estate, then something's going to happen where somebody doesn't like it, and guess who they're going to come after? They're going to come after, a lot of times, everybody's standing, okay? That's kind of the theory, is like, okay, let's go after everybody standing. And I was, in this case, one of the cases that come to mind right now, years ago, was a house I sold over in Murfreesboro. I remember it was Kicking Bear Court, a stucco home. I don't know if I should mention the address or not, but anyway, it was a drive at home, okay? And I'm not against drive at homes, but my client asked me, so what do you think about drive it? And I said, well, it's a synthetic stucco, and it's nothing wrong with it as long as it all comes down to the application. If it's been applied properly And several years ago, I don't know if you know what drive it is, Carey Ann, it's kind of a cement material over styrofoam is basically what it is. Okay. And years ago, they actually was a mandated requirement that all these types of homes, at grade level, it had to be cut up to like 10 inches or a foot, something like that. So it gave a visible, you could see if any termites were going up and down. Okay. That was the purpose of it, because down into the ground, you couldn't see that. And there were some problems. And that was most of the problems with the drive. It was moisture issues. So anyhow, we walked around this house in Murfreesboro on the golf course, and he asked me about this, and I said, it's all about the application. And fortunately for us, the current owners at the time had just put $6,000 in sealing the windows, sealing the doors, cutting up the bottom of it, making sure everything was tight. Yeah. Okay. There was no issues with the property. And so I said, it has its look. A lot of people like that look. And as long as you're maintaining it sealed, there's no moisture getting in anywhere, then I don't see a problem with it. So anyway, they bought the house, and about 2 months into ownership, the upstairs in the game room refrigerator had given up the ghost, and so he had gotten water all over the carpet. So they pulled the carpet back from the outside, pulled it to the inside. Okay, grabbed that outside connection to the carpet and pulled it back. So when he did that, he noticed on the tack strip that it looked like termites had eaten the inside of the tack strip. He thought, well, how can that be on the second floor? That's not possible, surely. Anyhow, long story short, with a little investigation, found out that the whole front of that home had been eaten out. Okay?
Oh, crazy.
All the 2x4s had been just chowed down on. And it's amazing what termites can do when they do get into one like that. And what had happened, even though the people had, now keep in mind, again, my real estate friends, the termite company was not named in the lawsuit. The termite company who did the inspection, I'm not down on termite companies whatsoever, but if you'll look at a report, this is real life. If you look at a report, you'll see multiple, areas where they couldn't look. It could be a box in the garage or whatever. Okay, it's all kinds of hold harmlesses in there, and that's because it's a visual inspection. I get that.
Sure.
Okay, but if they're not taking responsibility of the outcome of that termite report, why would the realtor have to?
Right.
Why? Because we're one of the people standing around, and we have ENO Insurance. Mm-hmm. And why? Because we have to have that, but in ENO Insurance, they don't want to fight that. They want to settle. So anyway, I ended up having to go in that experience. I had to sit through a 9-hour deposition.
9 hours. Wow.
Carey Ann, I wanted to cry afterwards. I mean, I felt like, you know what a tomato worm looks like? Big old juicy green tomato worm.
Okay. I'm imagining.
Okay. You're not a gardener, are you?
No.
Okay, well, Connie and I are gardeners, so that was probably not a good example, maybe. But can you imagine a worm, just a regular worm?
Sure,
okay?
I got that.
You're a fisherwoman.
I put it on a hook.
You're a fisherwoman. Let's go with a regular worm.
Okay.
And you've got about 3 or 4 chickens coming after you.
Sure.
Can you imagine what that's like? Okay, well, that's what I felt like after those 3 attorneys were pecking on me. And I felt like I wanted to cry after that 9-hour deposition, and all because they were trying to find fault in the fact that I had represented my buyer, and my buyer was suing me. My buyer was suing the seller, and everybody's standing. And he sued the inspector, but the inspector in that case didn't bother to show up because he had let his insurance expire. So interesting. I could go down that road for a little ways, but I won't since he's still out there inspecting homes. God bless him. But anyway, so the point of the story is this, guys. It's really, really, really important to understand your ENO Insurance serves a purpose, but it's really also what that 9-hour deposition taught me was everything you do with your real estate transactions, you've got to be mentally prepared as though you were shouting it from the housetops, okay? Right. That the whole world knew everything about that transaction from every line that you filled out because you're ultimately responsible for that. And that was exhausting. Anyway, so Chrissy, tell us what's going on where, you had started to share recently with me an experience that you are either in now or have experienced in the past. What's your experience with the need of ENO Insurance?
Well, I will say I started in real estate back in 2008, and it took me 5 years before I took the plunge into being an active licensee and going out there and representing buyers and sellers and writing contracts because I was absolutely terrified of somebody coming after me. I didn't want 9 chickens pecking at me, So 5 years it took me of doing contracts and transaction coordination and, being in the industry long enough to feel confident that I wouldn't be, one of these stories. And I've been lucky enough that really I haven't had a lot of incident. Being a transaction coordinator and a broker's assistant, I've gotten really good at the details. And even when I thought that I was as good as I could be and there was nothing there was nothing that could come back, I have this crazy incident that is going on now. So I will let this kind of be a warning that these really unusual things can still happen. So what happened was I was representing a buyer that was purchasing 2 lots together, and that was indicated on the purchase contract. What had kind of come up in conversation was that in the state where I was selling this, the county was actually approaching people and asking can we purchase part of your lot or the additional lot or whatever the case is so that we can ensure that the building isn't overtaking the environment and that lot won't be built on. So it would still be owned by you, but for all technical purposes, you really couldn't change it and you had to preserve its environmental status because of this deal you made with the county.
Sure.
Which is great. But my specific buyers, they wanted to purchase these 2 lots. They wanted to have the opportunity to build on that back lot. So they didn't want to take this offer from the county. And it was not required. So they just didn't want the money that the county was offering them.
Sure, yeah.
So we go about it makes sense. It's an option. But if you want to build, I don't need the money. I want the option. So we get all the way to closing. We've closed successfully. Everybody is happy. A year goes by. And I get a call that says that there's an investigation with our Department of Professional Regulation because turns out that seller, even though they said there was nothing hindering that closing, took the county offer and sold that lot while they were under contract with my buyer.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So my buyers closed on this deal we purchased this double lot when really one of them had been sold out from under them during the course of it, which obviously the seller wasn't legally able to do. But the big, unique, kind of crazy thing that happened here is that the department came to me, not that the seller, had this wrongdoing and the department was investigating them. The department came to me because in the property description, there were these auto-populated lot numbers. And it populated from the tax record, but all these other lot numbers didn't apply. We were only addressing these 2. So there was a strike through on these lot numbers. And there was no initial next to the strike through. Wasn't part of the contract terms. It wasn't even applicable lot numbers. Mm-hmm. It was a strike through. So what they were doing was coming to me saying because there were no initials next to the strike through, this wasn't a valid contract. So their seller had all the right in the world to sell that to the county because we didn't actually have a valid contract.
Wow. All because of an initial?
So all because of an initial next to strike through that had nothing to do with the contract. And what really blew my mind was that they weren't going after the seller for something that was very clearly ethically wrong. They were coming after me for missing initials on one line item that wasn't even relevant. And I thought I crossed all my T's and dotted all so well. And that's the case that's pending now. And I spent hours on the phone explaining who sent what, when, and how this came to be. And it's crazy that they're not actually going after the sellers, but they're coming after me for one initial.
So explain to the average Joe out there, and maybe I'm just the one that's clueless. So your ENO Insurance will cover the cost of attorney fees, or what does that do?
Yeah.
What does it do to protect?
My ENO, my ENO Insurance is if this were to progress beyond this investigation, they would consider this an error on my part professionally for not obtaining initials, and then they would cover that. So thank goodness I always have ENO Insurance. I've always been very compliant for that, but I really never thought I would need it. And then this is just kind of one of those unique things.
And is this an option? Not every real estate agent has it, or is it a requirement?
It's a requirement to have ENO insurance, but one thing I do want to plug here for the whole requirement and thought process is because typically the local real estate professional just gets the minimum, which is I think $100,000. We at this office highly recommend that you get $1 million coverage. It doesn't cost that much more. I mean, we're talking about a few $100s a year. You know, I think it's a couple $100 a year every 2 years for $100,000, and it's only maybe twice that for $1 million. Because when you start, you know, our friend Jim Payne is not here right now. We laughed at him, not in a funny way, because my heart went out to him because he had a couple of situations in a row. Oh, and I think he's the one that brought it to our attention that look. It really doesn't take long in Williamson County, especially around Green Hills. He had a situation around Green Hills that it can eat up $1 million in coverage really, really quick. So we highly recommend that you get that $1 million coverage. Just as a side note here, guys, and I don't have a dog in the fight. Get whatever you need to. I'm just saying from experience, if you're in the business long enough, as I mentioned earlier, it's about numbers of transactions, and somewhere. I mean, Chrissy, this is such an irrelevant experience that you're sharing here, because how many of us are guilty of missing one little thing, and you don't think it's a big deal because everybody's happy, everybody's moving forward, it's not going to matter, it's going to be closed in a few weeks, and how can that come back and bite you? Wow, to think, and here's the other part. This is the part that's hard for me to wrap my brain around, Chrissy, and that is you are 1,000 times more detailed than I am, as an example. And you know, if that caught you, then again, please listen to our real estate friends here. Please listen how important that one little initial that now can literally cost you. I mean, that example I gave you earlier, that still cost, even though my deductible is only $1,000, it still cost me several $1,000s. And the reason for that, in my case, was I had actually, as a courtesy to my buyers, I had signed off on the documents. Now, that was years ago when that happened. We don't do that now because my ENO Insurance company said, we'll cover you this time, but if you ever sign for a buyer again, you will not have ENO Insurance on that transaction. So you can't do that. I was trying to be nice to my buyers, and yet they're the ones that turn around and sued me and the seller. So, man, that scares me, Christy. I didn't know the details of this thing. When I think about one initial opening the door, and that's the hard part to try to wrap your brain around, is they don't even go after some of the other parties. Sometimes they go after the easiest money. The easiest money is we real estate professionals, you know?
Yeah, that's definitely scary. With, you know, the common sense, I guess, gets thrown out the window because clearly this seller knew he was selling it to two parties, right? Clearly.
Yes. How could he not be named in that lawsuit?
Yeah. But then to think that she's in trouble because they're going to hold it all on an initial. That's just insane.
I know.
And then, you know, on your side too, I can see where he's upset. So he's going to just, you know, go after anything and everything that's breathing at that point. But that is just crazy too. And then the flip side to me, I just wouldn't know. I would be more scared to sue because I would think it would cost me more money in the long run. I've tried to sue a few times and I was like, hey, I'm out.
Well, you need to be suing realtors, I guess.
I mean, because you know, but I mean, there's a lot of things. No, and I would never do that. But, you know, possibly the house we're living in has a lot of chaos, and I assumed one and it turned out to be another. I didn't even know that I could possibly, you know, through that. So you do have, you know, we're in the business, like you said, it's a power of numbers. We're talking to so many different families. Unless we give them all personality tests to know exactly what, you know, we're dealing with there, it would be very hard to know, you know, that this individual that is smiling and rah, and it's all good.
Everybody's excited.
Yeah. And then it flips.
And to go back to that original example that I gave on the beginning of our show, where I was, you know, threatened to being sued for a garage that was a two-car garage, had a two-car garage door, but they couldn't get their van in the door. Okay, here's a little bit of backstory on that. My clients were nice enough to let those folks move into the house a week early. Now, in my experience, I've only sold a few thousand homes, so I'm not saying across the board, but in my experience, if there's a question, if Wade's wondering if his boat will fit in the garage, what are we going to do?
Yeah, we always check.
We're going to measure it, okay? Or we're going to at least step it off, okay? I know how. I mean, how we're going to step it off. Nothing was, you know, said like that until after the fact, and then we had a choice of either being sued. We in mediation was how far it went, and I was saying to the mediator, who's a pretty well-known individual around town. I said, look, if this lawsuit goes through because I claimed it was a 2-car garage and it wasn't and they weren't able to get their van on both sides of that garage. What the deal was, the backstory is that it had it was one of those garages that had some stairway going into it, okay, from the inside of the house.
Sure.
And that does cut one bay a little bit, okay? But it was still pretty typical. The other side was a full size. But I referred to it as a 2-car garage. Well, my argument to the mediation committee there was, look, if this is a one in court, then what does it look like for the person who sold a home to somebody and then found out afterwards that their dining room table didn't fit or their master bedroom didn't fit or all these other things, because there's never been really a clear precedent of what equals a 2-car garage. In my world, it's a 2-car garage door. Now it's amazing what a 9-hour deposition will do for you. I'm sorry, I didn't go through 9 hour on that one. I was on the other one, but just that kind of a challenge, to have to walk through, to be threatened on something like this.
Well, I bought a house with a 4-car garage. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the 4th car garage only fits my Christmas trees. And it's not even a full car garage. Like, you can't get a full car. You might get Aubrey's car in there.
You know you can.
Now, what are you trying to tell me? But
that's 16 trees you have, right?
But it doesn't fit a full car. But it was marketed to a 4-car garage. You get what I'm saying? It's only it's for maybe a lawnmower or something like that. So you're right. But there is an assumption that many of us start to purchase these vehicles that are larger, right? When these garages were built. And I always laugh because the car garages that are the separate unit ones, I would much rather have the one door with the 2-car. In my mind, I can at least get my car in, right? But when you give the single doors, and then they have a little gap and say, there's nothing's getting in there, in my opinion.
It's for bikes and stuff.
Yeah, but you already know that looking at it, I mean, you would have to. I mean, who do I sue because I can't get my cell phone to work in my house? Where does that come into play? Like, as I can't, who knew that you should probably test that you can call and talk to somebody
we always
in
do
your
that,
phone.
For sure.
I didn't. Yeah, that's a good recommendation.
Especially out in the country. Now, you don't live out in the country, but a lot of times we show properties, years ago, when there was a lot of well water, we'd taste the water, to see if is it tolerable or not. But we always, if we're out in the country, we always check to see what kind of service we have. But part of the challenge of that last one was after, so we were presented with, okay, we don't go to court if the seller will buy the home back, which put me in a situation, I had to sell it for free then to him because I'd already gotten paid on the first time. And so we did that. And then about 2 months later, we found out that we were the second prey that these people had done this to, okay? So there's those kind of people out there that's just heartbreaking. But anyhow, the purpose of the show is to remind everybody, look, guys, we look like a pile of money as far as many attorneys are concerned out there. And something as absolutely innocent as a missed initial can open the door for now, a real challenge. I mean, there's plenty of other examples we could give. I've heard one recently where a seller had gone into an attic and created a room where there wasn't supposed to be a room. That's going to be an interesting one to see what happens there.
For like a bedroom or their Christmas trees?
No, we're talking about a bedroom, cut out a lot of important members of the attic, I guess. I don't know the details of it. I just have heard it secondhand. But anyway, everybody be cautious out there. Be careful what you're... Chrissy, anything else on that topic?
No, I mean, I think that's a lot of good advice. I guess the one takeaway I have from my experience was this thing came like a year after our closing. So even when you think that you might be good, I just say keep good records, keep good details, and just stay on top. And like you said, be able to stand by what you did in that transaction and scream it from the rooftops, and you should be good.
And keep your ENO insurance paid up.
And I think you made a good point, though.
Yeah.
we might possibly don't think we're ever going to use it, which I don't need it for my industry, but you don't think you're ever going to need it. And because we're talking about it today, you are going to need it because something is going to happen. And so making sure that you have enough, I'm a big believer, and a lot of the insurance agents want to make sure we're all protected for that rainy day. And, usually if something's going to happen, it's not going to be small. It's usually going to be very large. So getting a larger amount of coverage is really important. So just coming out every week to provide some new value adds for you real estate agents out there. Today was all things ENO Insurance. We're just so appreciative of you coming out and listening to us every week. We will see you again next week. The talk of Music City Real Estate.